Daniel Cooper was a man who lived far away from towns, noise, and people. His ranch sat in the middle of wide-open land in Arizona, where the mornings were bright and the evenings turned golden. To anyone passing by, it seemed like the perfect quiet life. But the quiet was exactly what Daniel had gotten used to, maybe too used to. He had been living alone for so many years that he almost forgot what it felt like to have another person inside his home. He was in his early 50s, strong in build because of the heavy work he did every day, but his face showed a calm sadness that he carried without talking about it. His days were all the same. He woke up before sunrise, boiled water for coffee, and stood by his window looking out at the land. The silence became a part of him, something he accepted as normal. Daniel had not always been like this. Many years ago, he used to be warm, talkative, and even funny. He used to sit with neighbors, attend local gatherings, and help people whenever they needed him. But then life changed in small ways that slowly became bigger. His parents passed away one after another, leaving him with the ranch to run alone. A long-time relationship that he thought would turn into marriage faded away, leaving him unsure of how to trust again. Over time, he closed parts of his heart without even realizing he was doing it. The strangest part was that talking to women became difficult for him, not because he disliked them, but because he felt too out of practice. He worried he would say something wrong or appear foolish. The last real conversation he had with a woman was so long ago that he could barely remember the sound of laughter shared between him and someone else. It wasn't that he avoided women. They simply never came around his ranch, and he never went anywhere to meet them. So life slipped into a rhythm that didn't require him to talk to anyone except his horses and the wind. Every morning after breakfast, Daniel went outside to begin his work. He checked the fences along the property, looked after his animals, and repaired anything that needed fixing. The ranch demanded attention, and he gave it his all. It kept him busy, and being busy meant he didn't have to think much about the loneliness inside him. Sometimes he wondered why he had become so comfortable with being alone. But those thoughts came and went as quickly as the clouds that drifted across the sky. One warm afternoon, Daniel saddled his horse, Rusty, and rode out toward the canyon area on the edge of his land. He needed to check the water lines that supplied the animals during the dry seasons. The sun was high, and the ground shimmered with heat. Rusty walked at a slow pace, and Daniel enjoyed the breeze that brushed across his face. The ride always gave him a sense of peace. When he reached the narrow trail leading down to the canyon floor, he dismounted and walked on foot. The land was quiet except for the soft sound of wind moving through the rocks. He bent down near the water line and tested it, making sure nothing was blocked. Everything looked fine. He dusted off his hands and stood up straight, stretching his back after bending for too long. As he prepared to head back, something caught his eye. The ground near the trail looked disturbed. At first, he thought it might be deer tracks, since deer often moved through the area searching for shade. But when he stepped closer, he noticed the prints were different. They were footprints, human footprints. Several of them. Daniel frowned. It wasn't common for people to wander onto his land, especially not on this side. It was far from the main road, and not easy to reach without effort. He studied the prints carefully. They were lighter than a man's, and some of them were smaller. It looked like more than one person had passed through recently. He stood still for a moment, listening to the open land as if it would give him answers. But the silence told him nothing. He brushed the dust off his jeans and followed the prints a few steps to see where they led. They continued across the dry ground, heading toward the direction of his ranch. Strange, he whispered to himself. For a man who lived alone by choice, the idea of unexpected visitors made him uneasy. He wasn't used to people showing up suddenly, and he definitely wasn't used to conversations, especially with women. But he reminded himself that his land wasn't dangerous or restricted. Anyone could wander through if they got lost or needed help. He wasn't the type to turn someone away. He just wasn't sure how to handle such a situation anymore. On his ride back to the ranch, Daniel kept thinking about the footprints. Who were they? What were they doing out here? And why did it look like they were heading toward his home? His mind tried to come up with answers, but none of them made sense. Visitors were almost unheard of. It had been months since anyone had even knocked on his door. As he got closer to the ranch, Rusty's ears perked up, and Daniel noticed movement near the gate. His heart beat a little faster, not in fear, but in surprise. It had been so long since he had seen unfamiliar faces on his land. From a distance, he saw the shapes of 3 people standing near his fence. Their clothes looked dusty, and they seemed tired from walking under the strong sun. Daniel slowed the horse and watched them for a moment before approaching. They didn't look threatening. They didn't even look strong enough to cause trouble. They appeared more in need of help than anything else. He took a deep breath before riding forward, feeling a sudden tightness in his chest, the kind people feel when they know something unusual is about to happen. For a man who had lived in silence for years, seeing 3 strangers, especially women, standing at his gate was almost unreal. Little did he know, this quiet moment was the beginning of a change he never expected. His life, wrapped in years of silence and distance, was about to shift in ways he couldn't imagine, and it all started with a set of footprints in the dust. Daniel slowed his horse as he approached the 3 figures standing near his gate. The closer he got, the clearer they became. 3 women, all looking tired from walking under the hot Arizona sun, stood quietly, as if unsure whether they should call out to him or wait for him to come closer. Their clothes were dusty, and each carried a small bag that showed they had traveled far. Even from a distance, Daniel noticed the gentle but worried expressions on their faces. It was clear that whatever brought them here was not simple. He stopped Rusty a few steps away and got off the horse slowly. His heart beat faster than usual, not because he felt threatened, but because he hadn't spoken to strangers in so long, and especially not to women. He took a deep breath and forced himself to speak first. "Hello there," he said, his voice a little rough from lack of use. The woman in front stepped forward. She appeared to be in her late 30s, with calm eyes and long dark hair tied loosely. "Hello," she said politely. "We're sorry to come without notice. We didn't want to bother you, but we didn't know what else to do." Daniel nodded, unsure what to say yet. The woman continued, "My name is Lena. These are my sisters, Taya and Nori." The 2 women behind her gave gentle nods. One looked a bit younger, maybe in her 20s, and the other seemed closer in age to Lena. Daniel adjusted his hat nervously. "Is everything all right?" Lena offered a tired smile. "We've been walking for hours. Our truck broke down miles back on the dirt road. We tried fixing it ourselves, but it wouldn't start. We didn't have a way to call anyone, so we kept walking until we reached your land." Daniel listened carefully. Their voices were calm, respectful, and honest. There was no sign of trouble in their eyes, only exhaustion. "We were hoping," Lena added slowly, "that maybe you could give us some water, and maybe a little shelter for a short while, just until we figure out what to do." Daniel felt a familiar heaviness in his chest. He wanted to help, but talking to people, especially women after so long, made him feel unsteady. It wasn't fear. It was more like discomfort from being out of practice, but he reminded himself that they were simply travelers in need, and he didn't have it in his heart to turn away someone who needed help. "Of course," he finally said. "Come inside the gate. You can rest on the porch. I'll get water." The women thanked him softly as he opened the gate. Rusty followed quietly, sensing the calmness of the moment. Daniel led them to the porch, where they sat down gratefully in the shade. The younger woman, Nori, rubbed her feet as if they were sore from walking. Taya leaned back against the wooden post, closing her eyes for a moment as the shade offered relief. Daniel went inside to get water, his hands slightly shaking even though he tried to steady himself. He felt strange, like he was stepping into a world he had forgotten how to be part of. But he reminded himself that kindness didn't need practice. It just needed a willing heart. When he walked back outside with 3 glasses of cold water, the women accepted them with deep gratitude. "Thank you," Lena said sincerely. "We didn't expect to see anyone out here, but we're glad we found your ranch." Daniel gave a small nod. "Most people don't come this far. It's quiet land. They took slow sips of water, letting the coolness bring life back into their tired bodies. For a few moments, everyone stayed quiet. The wind blew softly across the porch, moving the hanging lanterns. Daniel stood awkwardly, unsure if he should sit or keep standing. Finally, he chose a chair a few steps away, keeping a respectful distance. After a moment, Taya spoke. "We're on our way back to our reservation. We were visiting a relative in a nearby town. The trip was supposed to be simple, but the truck had other plans," Nori added with a small smile. "We're used to small problems on the road, but this time it was too much for us to fix." Daniel watched them as they spoke. Their voices were gentle, and their way of speaking was polite and calm. He realized they weren't strangers to long journeys or challenges, but even strong people needed help sometimes. "Do you want me to take a look at your truck?" Daniel asked, surprising himself with his own offer. Lena's face brightened. "If it's not too much trouble, that would mean a lot to us." "Team the very 44. Team the very 4. Daniel nodded shyly. "I can drive out there after you rest a bit." The women thanked him again. Their gratitude felt warm, almost healing to Daniel, who hadn't heard appreciation from another person in years. For the first time in a long time, he felt useful not just to his ranch, but to someone else. He brought them some food, next simple bread, fruit, and some cheese. They ate slowly, enjoying every bite. Daniel noticed how careful they were, taking only what they needed and thanking him for everything. Their manners made him feel comfortable, something he didn't expect. After they rested for a while, Daniel saddled Rusty again, and the women walked with him toward the road where their truck had broken down. They chatted lightly on the way. The sisters shared short stories about their community, their traditions, and the places they had traveled. Daniel mostly listened, quietly absorbing their words. There was something peaceful about their voices, something that made him feel at ease, even though he hadn't spoken much. When they reached the truck, Daniel knelt beside it and checked the engine. He wasn't a professional mechanic, but living on a ranch meant learning how to fix almost anything. He studied the parts carefully, testing connections and checking the battery. "I think the battery cable is loose," he finally said. Lena let out a relieved breath. "Is it fixable?" "Yes," Daniel replied. "Give me a few minutes." With steady hands, he tightened the cable and cleaned off some dust that had gathered around it. After he was done, he asked them to try starting the truck. When the engine roared to life, the women clapped their hands in joy. "You fixed it," Nori said happily. Daniel stood up, brushing dirt off his hands. It wasn't much, but to the women, it was a lot. They thanked him with heartfelt appreciation, telling him how grateful they were for his kindness. "I'm glad I could help," Daniel said softly. Lena stepped forward and looked at him kindly. "We can see you're a good man. You didn't have to help us, but you did." Her words made something warm rise in Daniel's chest. He wasn't used to receiving such simple, sincere praise. Before leaving, the women asked if they could rest a little longer at his ranch before continuing their journey. Daniel agreed without hesitation, surprising even himself with how natural the yes felt. Back at the ranch, the atmosphere was peaceful. The women sat on the porch again, chatting softly among themselves. Daniel stayed nearby, fixing a loose board on the railing, pretending to be busy but secretly listening to their voices. There was something comforting about their presence. He hadn't realized how empty the ranch had felt until they arrived. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting everything gold, the sisters shared more stories about their community, their work, and their traditions. Daniel listened closely, feeling a connection forming, something gentle and unexpected. He didn't know it yet, but this small moment, this simple meeting, was going to change something deep inside him. His quiet life was slowly opening up in ways he never saw coming. The next morning on the ranch began differently than usual. Daniel woke up before sunrise, the same way he always did. But something felt new. The air felt lighter. The silence did not feel as heavy as it usually did. He could hear soft voices outside on the porch, and that alone was unusual enough to make him pause. He washed his face, put on his boots, and stepped outside. The three sisters were already awake. Lena was warming her hands around a cup of tea. Taya was gently brushing dust from her shoes, and Nori was watching the sky slowly change colors as the sun edged closer to the horizon. When they noticed Daniel step out, they greeted him with warm smiles. He felt shy for a moment, still not fully used to having guests at his place. But their kindness made him feel more comfortable. "You're up early," Lena said kindly. "Always am," Daniel replied quietly. "There's always something to do on the ranch," Taya smiled. "Your land is beautiful in the morning." Daniel glanced around. It was the same land he had seen for years, but hearing someone else admire it made him look at it differently. The soft orange light, the peaceful open space, the slow waking of the animals, it all felt more alive with the sisters there to witness it. He boiled water and made coffee for himself, and tea for the sisters. When he brought out the cups, they thanked him gently, as if his simple gesture meant much more than he realized. He sat on the porch steps while they sat in rocking chairs, and for a while everyone enjoyed the quiet morning together. After some time, Lena looked over at him. "We want to thank you again for helping us yesterday," she said. "You didn't know us, but you trusted us and opened your home." Daniel looked down at his hands. "Anyone would have helped," he said softly. "No," Lena replied gently. "Not everyone." Her simple words stayed in his mind longer than he expected. He wasn't used to praise. It made him feel good but also unsure of how to respond. As the morning went on, the ranch slowly filled with small movements. Daniel fed the horses and invited the sisters to walk with him if they wanted to see the animals. They eagerly accepted, especially Nori, who seemed to love the horses more than anything. The horses sensed the gentle energy of the visitors. It was almost strange for Daniel to watch animals that were usually cautious with strangers seemed calm around the sisters. Rusty even lowered his head toward Taya, letting her pet him without hesitation. "You have a way with them," Daniel said quietly. Taya laughed softly. "Animals understand our hearts better than people sometimes." Daniel agreed with a small nod. He had believed that for years, maybe because animals couldn't judge or misunderstand. But watching the three women interact with his horses made him feel something shift inside him. They were not just passing guests. There was a natural kindness in them that made his ranch feel warm in a way it hadn't felt in years. After tending to the animals, Daniel showed them the small vegetable garden he kept. Lena admired the healthy plants and asked him about how he grew them in the hot climate. He explained how he watered them early in the morning and shaded them during the hottest hours. The sisters listened with interest, asking questions and sharing stories about their own gardening experiences back home. Their conversation flowed easily, something Daniel hadn't experienced in a long time. He found himself speaking more than usual, telling small stories about his land, his routines, and even memories he thought he had buried. It felt natural, almost effortless. Later, when they returned to the porch to rest, Lena looked at him thoughtfully and said, "You have a quieter way of living, but it's a peaceful one." Daniel smiled faintly. "Peaceful, maybe, but sometimes too quiet." Taya tilted her head. "Do you ever feel lonely?" The question surprised Daniel. Not because it was rude, but because it was honest, more honest than anyone had spoken to him in years. He paused for a moment, and then answered truthfully. "Sometimes," he said. "I guess I got used to it." Nori leaned forward with a gentle expression. "Used to it doesn't always mean happy with it." Her words settled deep in him. For so long, he had accepted his solitude as normal, something he didn't question. But now, sitting with these three women who spoke with such warmth and clarity, he realized that he had forgotten what it felt like to share moments with others. The sisters didn't push him to talk more. They simply let the silence settle in a comfortable way. The kind of silence that didn't feel heavy or awkward. It was new to Daniel, this kind of quietness shared with people. Around noon, they all worked together to make lunch. It felt strange for Daniel to have people in his kitchen, but their presence didn't make him uncomfortable. Instead, he found himself enjoying the soft laughter and the sound of their voices blending with the noises of the ranch. They talked about their community, its traditions, its celebrations, the importance of family and connection. Daniel listened with deep interest. Their stories were colorful and full of meaning. They spoke about gathering around large tables, helping each other with daily chores, and how everyone in their village knew each other. Daniel found himself imagining a place like that, where people stayed connected and supported each other. It was so different from his lonely ranch life that it made him think about what he had been missing. After lunch, they sat outside again, enjoying the mild afternoon. Daniel felt comfortable enough to open up a little more about his past. He told them how he grew up on the ranch, how his parents loved the land, and how their passing left him feeling lost for a long time. He spoke gently, choosing his words carefully. The sisters listened with respect, never interrupting, never judging. Their quiet presence made it easy for him to speak. "It must have been hard," Lena said gently when he finished. Daniel nodded. "I guess I didn't know what else to do, so I stayed here and kept going." Nori added softly, "Sometimes we protect our hearts by closing ourselves off. But after a while, it becomes a habit that's hard to break." Daniel looked at her with surprise. "How did you know?" She smiled. "We've met many people in our travels. It's not hard to see when someone has a gentle heart that's been quiet for too long." The words touched him deeper than he expected. He felt seen, understood, even respected. And that feeling was rare for him. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting soft gold across the ranch, Daniel walked with them to see the fields again. They walked slowly, talking about little things, plants, animals, the weather. Every simple topic felt easier to talk about in their company. For the first time in years, Daniel felt a sense of belonging. Not because the ranch was his, or because the land was familiar, but because he was sharing it with people who brought it to life with their presence. The sisters' kindness reminded him of something he had forgotten. Human connection didn't have to be complicated. It could be gentle, natural, and comforting. That evening, as they sat around a small fire on the ranch, the sisters told stories from their childhood, light-hearted stories that made Daniel smile and even laugh softly. His laughter sounded strange to him at first, like something he had forgotten how to do, but it felt good, warm, and real. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Daniel realized something important. The quiet life he had lived for so long wasn't wrong, but it wasn't complete either. He needed connection, even if he hadn't admitted it to himself before. The presence of the three women had opened a small door inside him, letting light into places he had kept closed. He didn't know what would happen tomorrow or when they would continue their journey, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was becoming himself again. He didn't say much, but the peaceful smile on his face said everything he couldn't put into words. The next morning arrived with soft light slowly spreading across the ranch, touching the wooden fence, the fields, and the porch where Daniel usually sat alone. But today he was not alone, and the difference felt peaceful. He could hear the sisters talking quietly inside the kitchen, their voices light and warm. It felt almost like the ranch itself was happier, as if the place had been waiting for company for a long time. Daniel stepped outside to breathe the cool morning air. For years, mornings had been predictable and silent. He would drink coffee, look out at the land, and begin a long day of work, with no one to speak to. Today the air carried a different feeling, something hopeful, something alive. He felt it in himself, too. A quiet shift he could not explain but didn't want to ignore. A few minutes later, Lena stepped outside carrying 2 cups. "Good morning," she said with a gentle smile. Daniel returned the smile, though his version was shy. "Morning. I made tea. Thought you might like some before breakfast." Daniel accepted it carefully. The simple act of someone making him a warm drink felt unexpectedly touching. He had forgotten what it felt like to be cared for in small ways. Soon after, Nori and Taya came out as well, stretching their arms while they admired the fresh morning light. "Your ranch feels different at sunrise," Nori said softly. "It feels peaceful." Daniel looked at the land he had known all his life. It looked the same, yet somehow her words made him see beauty he had stopped noticing. Maybe it wasn't the land that changed, maybe it was him. After breakfast, the sisters began preparing their things. The truck was fixed, and they were ready to continue their journey. Daniel knew this moment would come, but he felt a gentle ache in his chest when he saw them gathering their bags. He didn't want to show it, so he busied himself checking the truck again to make sure everything was still working well. Lena walked up to him while he tightened the last bolt. "You've been very kind to us," she said quietly. "We won't forget it." "It wasn't anything," Daniel replied, looking down at his hands. "Just helping travelers." "It was more than that," Lena said. "You welcomed us with honesty. We felt safe here." Those words meant more to him than she knew. Safe. He had lived alone for so long that he had almost forgotten that people could feel safe around him. It warmed something deep inside him. Taya joined them and added, "You have a good heart, Daniel. It shows in everything you do." Daniel felt speechless for a moment. Compliments were rare in his life, and receiving more than one in a single day felt overwhelming but warm. Before getting into the truck, Nori lingered near the porch, looking around thoughtfully. "Your ranch doesn't feel empty," she said gently. "It feels like it was waiting for company." Daniel wondered if she could see things in him that he had hidden from himself. "Maybe it was," he admitted softly. "I guess I got too used to silence." Nori smiled. "Silence isn't a bad thing. But even silence needs company sometimes." He nodded slowly. Her words sounded simple, but they held a truth he felt deeply. The sisters got into the truck, and Daniel stood a few steps away, feeling strange and unsure. Part of him wanted to say something more, something meaningful, but he didn't know what words were right. He had not had many goodbyes in his life, so he didn't know how they were supposed to feel. Lena rolled down the window. "We're not going too far," she said. "Our reservation isn't more than a few hours away. If you ever want to visit, you're welcome." Daniel blinked in surprise. "Visit?" "Yes," Taya added warmly. "You helped us without hesitation. You're a friend now." The word friend echoed in Daniel's mind. It had been so long since he had felt anything close to friendship that the word almost felt new. A gentle warmth spread in his chest at the thought. "Maybe I will someday," he said quietly. "We hope so," Lena replied with a smile. They waved as the truck began to roll forward. Daniel stood in the dirt road, watching the vehicle slowly move away from the ranch, its tires kicking up light dust. He stayed there until the truck grew smaller and eventually disappeared behind the hills. The moment it vanished, the ranch became quiet again, quiet in the way it had been for years. But the silence now felt different. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't lonely. It felt like a pause, rather than an ending. Daniel walked back to the porch and sat down. The wooden chair creaked beneath him, the same sound he heard every day. But now the place felt less empty. The sisters' presence lingered, not in a physical sense but in the feeling they left behind. They had brought a spark of life into his home, the kind of spark that stayed even after they were gone. As the hours passed, Daniel went about his chores. But he noticed something surprising. He no longer worked with the same tired rhythm as before. His steps had more energy, his mind wandered less into loneliness, and he felt a lightness inside that he hadn't felt in years. He found himself smiling at small things, Rusty nudging him for attention, the soft clucking of the chickens, the warm breeze brushing against his face. Everything felt new in a subtle way. Later in the afternoon, Daniel walked to the edge of his property, where the land opened into a wide view of distant hills. He stood there, thinking about the sisters. Their kindness, their stories, their gentle way of understanding people, it had touched him more than he expected. He realized something important. He had spent years believing he was meant to be alone, as if solitude was the only life he could live. But the sisters had showed him something different. They showed him that even a person who had grown silent and distant could still connect, still feel understood, and still open his heart again. He thought about their invitation to visit. The idea made him nervous. He hadn't traveled anywhere in a long time, and meeting new people wasn't something he was used to. But a part of him, a quiet part that had slept for years, felt curious. Maybe one day he would visit. Maybe one day he would see their community and learn more about their world. But even if he didn't go right away, the thought brought him comfort. Knowing he had friends somewhere out there made his world feel bigger. That evening, When the sky turned orange and pink, Daniel sat on the porch again, just as he always did. But this time, instead of feeling the loneliness he used to feel, he felt a gentle peace. He knew that life wouldn't suddenly transform overnight. He would still have quiet days, routine tasks, and long hours alone. But now he also knew something he had forgotten. People could bring unexpected light into a quiet life. Kindness could arrive in the form of strangers, and even the most silent heart could open again with the right company. The sisters had arrived at his ranch tired and in need of help, but without meaning to, they had helped him in return. They helped him remember that he wasn't invisible. He wasn't forgotten, and his life didn't have to stay silent forever. As stars slowly appeared in the sky, Daniel leaned back in his chair and looked toward the road they had taken. He didn't say the words aloud, but his heart whispered them quietly. "Thank you for reminding me what it feels like to connect." And for the first time in many years, the quiet night felt comforting, not empty, but full of promise.